You have done incredible work across a number of disciplines. I mean, from sexuality to evil to memory. And now in your upcoming book, Green Crime, Inside the Minds of the People Destroying the Planet and How to Stop Them. Can you speak to the psychology of the people, the organizations that are killing Earth, as you describe, including illegal gold miners, animal traffickers, conmen who falsify data and bribe regulators to keep polluting, and many other types of criminals? Is there psychology similar to the psychology of some of the folks we've been talking about?
So the book Green Crime is really an experiment for me in whether we can apply criminological and criminal psychology ideas to the area of environmental protection and crimes, because there are people who are convicted of crimes, specifically in relation to destroying the earth and our natural resources, our shared resources. I sometimes think about the earth as like a house, and if someone was coming into your house and just setting things on fire and then walking out unpunished, you'd be really upset. And correctly so. Or poisoning your water, or just like leaving a bunch of garbage all over your house. And that's what people are doing on a planetary scale. And the question is, are we responding effectively? And if so, who? Who is responding effectively? And then what is the adequate punishment? How should we deal with the people who we catch? And so in this book, the question was, are the people who are, for example, I used the Dieselgate Volkswagen case, which was all about lying about the emissions that were being produced by diesel cars, especially in the United States. And so Volkswagen, for 10 years, produced these cars that had what was called a defeat device, which is a specific device that makes it look like the cars don't emit very much nitrous oxides, but they actually were way over the legal limit for pollution. Now, why we should care about nitrous oxides is because there is no bottom limit of nitrous oxides that is healthy for the human lung. So basically any amount is bad for you. And it's related to things like asthma, it's related to things like premature death, it's related to all kinds of negative immediate health effects. And this is what was being pumped out of these cars at wildly high rates, 40 times the legal rates in some cases. And they just lied about it. They just covered it up. They knew they didn't. Well, some of the people, there's a big debate within the Volkswagen people who've been convicted. A lot of people say, I didn't really know, I'm being scapegoated. Fine. People knew. The question, how much and who, that's up for debate. But certainly people knew because they had to create the thing. Like, they had to literally create this piece of software to put into the cars. And then when they got caught, they lied about it. And eventually, the truth came out, but it was like 10 years later. And so the question is, what leads people, clever people, these aren't idiots, these are like clever engineers who are literally working on emissions. Like, they know exactly what these emissions do to people. They know exactly how harmful they are. What leads people like that to lie about it, to create these things, and to continue lying when they are caught? And so that is one of the cases I cover in it. And I'm looking at it more as a case study for this kind of crime, which is this sort of corporate collective crime, and the lying, and just what leads people in these settings to lie and to cover up each other's crimes and to conform to these new norms, these harmful environmental norms. And so I look at it in that way. And then in other chapters, I look at like people go undercover and uncover poaching gangs. And there it's somewhat procedural, where it's more, I didn't know that there were undercover agents infiltrating poaching gangs. I didn't know that Interpol was involved in all of these kinds of environmental crime and how. And it gets quite exciting in some of these cases where you really see the people who are trying to hold people accountable.
What are the different ways to fight environmental crime that you describe?
So what I found most interesting in researching for green crime, so I was speaking to people from the United Nations who are doing these huge research reports on things like the international trafficking and wildlife crime. I was talking to people who were infiltrating at the EIA, the Environmental Investigation Agency. It's like the sort of undercover police of the earth. And they're infiltrating these organized crime groups, these gangs that are involved in poaching and other activities. I was talking to this Interpol agent, and I think all of these people were talking about very different ways of measuring environmental crime and of responding to it. And so depending on who you talk to, the answer will be very different. How do we fight crime? And the answer is also very different potentially than in other kinds of crime that are more commonly discussed, like violent crime. So initially, when I started trying to apply criminal psychology to these really big crimes of that are often also multi-level, where you've got bosses, you've got whether it's a corporate boss or an illegal gang boss, you've got the middlemen, you've got the people on the ground who actually have the guns, who are killing people or animals or are logging or polluting. And then you've got sort of all these levels of people. And that makes it very different from the kinds of crimes that we often talk about in other kinds of true crime, for example, where it's sort of one person, maybe a couple of people, against one other person or a couple of other people. And so the scale is so tiny normally. And it's mostly violent crime, which is mostly it's arguments, it's bad decisions, it's people who are frankly often quite vulnerable themselves, like substance using, people with mental health problems, people who are sleeping rough. Like these are not healthy, normal people most of the time who are perpetrating bad crimes. And yet in this context, in environmental crime, this is where I couldn't apply the research directly. You've got some of the smartest people in the world who are still engaging in fraud, who are engaging in the cover-up of financial information, who are creating shell companies in order to hide certain things for poaching, the proceeds of poaching. You've got people who are out there illegally fishing, and someone's insuring the vessel that has been literally registered by Interpol as a criminal vessel for 10 years, and someone's going, I'll insure that. And so you've got these really complicated other factors going on. But I thought that's what was so interesting, is ultimately stripping back each layer of each of these crimes and going, who is that person? Who is the person who's ensuring this? Who is the person who is out there engaging in illegal fishing on the boat? Who is the person who's financing the boat? Who is the person who's investigating, right? And so looking at all the different levels. And I think that's where you get some clarity. And actually at the end of the book, for me, I felt so optimistic. I went into green crime because I, like most people in the world, at least according to a recent UN climate survey, something like 85 to 90% of people in the world think about the climate crisis on a regular basis. Most people think about it every single day. So this idea that there's this like minority of people who care about climate change, that's an illusion. That's not true. And if you ask people what the emotional consequences are of those feelings, it's people say things like eco-anxiety, anger, sadness, grief, that we're worried about the future. But what you want is for people to feel motivated, energized, purposeful about tackling one of the biggest issues of our time. And certainly by meeting all of these UN researchers, I went to so many conferences. You have no idea how many conferences I went to. I went to anti-corruption conferences. I went to wildlife crime conferences. I went to the specific meeting of multilateral agreements to see how people were negotiating in the room and the tensions between it. It was wild. It's so interesting. It's such a huge space, and it gave me so much hope for the future.
And actually, the way you frame it very clearly is a crime against the Earth. Somehow that's more actionable. And it's less controversial and divisive, because climate change as a topic has become like a political issue, where it's like, is it really happening? Is it what's the right policies? It's nice to look at actual obvious criminals.
Yeah, where no one's debating, did someone just burn down this rainforest? It's like, well, we can see it. I was at a European Space Agency conference recently, and they're telling us all about the different satellites that are imaging, sort of pointing at the Earth rather than out into space, and that are imaging through all these different wavelengths exactly what's changing. And they're basically just chronicling how the Earth has changed over time. And a lot of these environmental crimes can be seen from space and can be measured. And so it's like, as long as you trust those data, the question then is, okay, so these crimes are happening. How do we stop them? And as you say, I was very much trying. I mean, you can't write a book on environmental issues and be apolitical. I think that's impossible. But I certainly was trying to look at it quite logically and go, here's a crime. We all agree this is bad. And these are people who've been convicted. This isn't just like someone who didn't do their recycling. Because also I think that individual level is often detrimental. But these are huge, huge crimes that cost us a huge amount of money to clean up, and that cost a huge amount of human health, and have these other knock-on effects, and are changing certainly the structure of our planet in a way that we can feel already. And so that is the purpose of the book, is to try and show that we actually have lots of laws already. We've got lots of enforcers. We've got lots of researchers on it from space and not space, looking at these issues, tracking them, and trying to hunt down the criminals.
So what can you say about how people end up doing bad stuff in a company when there's a lot of them? Are they bad people? Like, how do you get to that place where you, in a large collective, are doing something really bad?
So the psychology of environmental crime, I find, often boils down to the same kinds of things that we have already been talking about in the context of quote unquote evil, where it's things like conformity. So doing what you think everyone else is doing or know what everyone else is doing. So there's an industry where you know that lots of people are cheating or are fudging the facts in some way, then you both feel the need and also maybe rationalize the ability to also deceive, because it's market forces, right? Like ultimately, in a free market or even a controlled one, you've got these people who are just lying to everybody else, and they're saying we're getting to these X outcome by following the rules that everyone else is, and they're not. They're just lying to consumers. They're lying to the regulators. They're just lying. And then other people who are trying to be honest and play the game clean, they see the success of this other company and go, well, we want to have what they have, and then they realize they can't, with the tech that exists, get there. And so what do they then realize is, well, they must be cheating. And so then they start cheating. And so it has this trickle effect of making everyone else fall in line with these, well, unethical practices that are unethical on so many levels. And then later you get these huge lawsuits because if you get caught, then everyone's upset. The investors are upset. The consumers are upset. The environmentalists, the lawyers, everybody's upset with you because you have committed this huge crime.
Yeah, I mean, you explain so many forces there, but even the simple force of social pressure, like very slight social pressure. I was just watching this documentary. It's based on a book, Ordinary Men, talking about the Germans in Nazi Germany that were taking part in the execution squads in Eastern Europe, and that they were given the option not to do it. And ultimately, most people decided to keep being part of the execution squad, even though they had no hatred in their heart, seemingly whatsoever. It's just slight social pressure. You don't want to be the guy that kind of chickens out. Just a little bit of social pressure, and you are able to very quickly dehumanize a large number of people and to murder them without any hate in your heart, without anything that could trivially, directly be identified as quote unquote evil. Just normal people doing very bad things.
And you can be an emissions engineer with a kid with asthma and an old grandma who's struggling with her health and still feel like, yeah, I know that I'm creating these dirty cars, and yet I'm going to do it anyway. Because as you say, there's the conformity, the social pressure, the rationalization, and those are all very human experiences. And that's why also in the book, I always focus on whistleblower is a big word, but like people who at some point actually helped to uncover what was going on. And that we're back to the topic of heroes. We're back to bystander effects. We're back to all of the social psychology and criminal psychology that we've been talking about this whole time, which is why I thought it was so important to apply that research to this context and to say, okay, so now we've got these people who are willing to engage in these crimes. They know it. But there's also this moment of how do you get out of it and who is going to stop them? And back to the idea of heroes. And you do usually in these cases at some point have a hero, either an external one or an internal one, who goes, this needs to stop.
Do you have empathy for those criminals?
I have empathy for everybody.
Has that ever been in your life challenged? Like, where you had trouble empathizing?
Ooh, there is one context. So there is one context that I don't know if it's that I have trouble empathize. I think it is I have trouble empathizing. And I just think it is, I don't want to. And I don't know why this is the one thing, but I remember writing Evil and I got to the section on sexual slavery. And there was something about that very specific issue of having women in particular in a confined area where you have often trafficked them and then you're forcing them to engage in repeated sexual acts that the person who is running that.
It's tough for you.
I can't. That's like I know that I'm not saying that that's the worst kind of crime. I don't think that necessarily is. I just think for my mind, there was just you can't go there. I don't know how to empathize with that person.